I want to talk about some things that you absolutely 100% should avoid in your 20s. These are things I wish I would have stayed away from, and unfortunately I didn't, and now I can share some of that with you and hopefully help other people out there avoid making the same mistakes that I made when I was younger. I have a whole bunch of videos talking about things that I would have done differently in my 20s and about growing older and wiser, and I feel that I just want to keep adding to that because it seems like a lot of younger people are relating to it, and I'm happy to help. The first thing I'm going to say, because this has been a struggle that I have dealt with my entire life. In my 20s, I dealt with a lot of addiction. I dealt with video game addiction, alcohol addiction, I dealt with weed addiction. I actually started using drugs before I was even a teenager, but it got serious as I got into my teen years, and then it got worse because I kind of got off of some of the harder drugs, and then I got into like drinking a lot and weed, and that felt like, oh, this is okay, but in reality it was actually really bad for me. Many people, especially when you're young and in your 20s, you'll be like, that's not that bad, weed and drinking and alcohol. Like, I know my friends that do perks and they're drinking lean and they're smoking meth and they're doing all this different stuff, and it's like smoking weed and drinking beer and playing video games isn't that bad. And it really is, especially when you think it's not that bad. And I'm not talking about like if you go for one summer and you drank a lot, or you smoked a lot, or you got really into Call of Duty for a month. I'm talking about the type of addiction that I had. It was every waking moment for me. I was someone who woke up and waked and baked and smoked all day long, and then the second that I got off of work, I was playing video games and I was drinking, and I did that for years and years and years, and I did it for a very long time. And I think about not just the damage that that has probably done to my body and my brain, but I think about just a lot of the mistakes that I made and a lot of the regret that I have from doing that stuff, and how it sits with me now as I've been clean for a year and I've been sober for a year. And it's something that I've battled with and struggled with for a while. But I think about, I really was peaking in my 20s. That's when it probably got the worst, because I was able to legally buy alcohol on my own. Before that, I used to have to get older people to buy it for me. I used to have to beg my mom to buy it for me, which she would. It seems like a lot of those things start to happen at that age because it's when you have more access to it. It's a slippery slope, and these things make us feel really good. And not just drugs and alcohol, but things that distract us, things like video games, things like TV, things like social media. Food is a pleasure, and too much food can be bad for you, and people get addicted to food. And understanding how dopamine works and how the pleasure system of your brain works and why you want to do these things, and getting a better understanding of that has helped me a lot with my struggles and helped me get out of my addiction. But these weren't things that I was worried about in my 20s. I was just looking to have fun and escape from some of the problems and trauma and things that were on my mind. And many of the times addiction stems from trauma and things that we're holding on to. They go hand in hand, and many times you see that addicts have a lot of trauma and a lot of problems that they're dealing with. If you don't take care of that stuff, the addiction is going to get you. But you have to understand the root cause. You have to understand why you get addicted to things, and you have to understand that it's not good for you. And doesn't matter how much you try to drink stuff away, smoke stuff away, and distract yourself, your problems are still going to be there the next day, and they're going to be there in 20 years from now. I realize now how I wish I would have just faced that stuff head on rather than trying to hide from it and run from it, because it took me up until like I was damn near 40 years old to realize that I can't run from it. I think of now constantly, I could have been repairing myself for so much time now, and I'm just starting to do that, and it's this game of catch up I'm playing with. I didn't think that when I was 40, I was going to be worried about things that happened to me when I was a kid. And I thought when I was in my 20s, if I could just drink and smoke and distract myself from all those things, that eventually I wouldn't think about it. But I still do. And I still do now. But now I'm understanding how to cope with that stuff. And it's much better. I feel like I'm ranting and digressing into what my topics were for this, but I just want to let you know that I'm speaking from a place of experience, and I'm trying to be as honest about this stuff as possible so that it really is helpful and not just a fluffy video to get views. The next thing. I talked a little bit about this with the addiction stuff because it has to do with the distractions, but wasting time. They have that saying that the youth is wasted on the young. And I think that wasting time is somewhat of a part of being young because you have so much time. It's just like if you had so much money, you'd probably spend it and you would waste some of your money because you didn't know what to do with it. And I think that that's pretty normal for younger people, because I see now, as someone who is older, who has responsibilities, who has a family, who's had a career, and who's done the whole adulting thing. I have gone through that. I'm going through it. And I look back now and I'm like, oh man, I had so much time and I squandered it. I wasted it frivolously on stupid shit. I have nothing to show for 10 years of life. I have achievements on an Xbox, and I have some memories that were fun. I look back now and I think of those memories and I'm like, man, it was fun, but it was stupid and it was very wasteful. And I wish that I would have laid a better foundation with the time that I had, so that now as I'm older, I could appreciate the time I have. But instead, I'm playing catch up because of the time that I wasted when I was younger. And I have this little anecdote that I think that if you waste more time, the more time you have to catch up, and the more you realize how valuable that time was. And the terrible thing about wasted time is that you cannot get time back. And I've seen comments in videos where I talk about this kind of stuff and they're like, oh, that's what your 20s are for. You're supposed to have a good time. Time having fun is not time wasted. I agree to an extent, but there's an extreme sense of wasted time when you spend 8 hours a day, every single day playing video games. I go back to video games and then people are like, oh, Dorian hates video games, but it's just, they took so much of my life. Even though video games are fun, you get caught up in the stories. I've played a lot of games that were awesome. I've loved video games. Like, I would spend all my free time thinking about my video games and going home and trying to do the things that I thought about. And this was back when World of Warcraft was around, right? When I was really young in my 20s and had to like read Thoughtbot or Wowhead, and there was forums, and the internet was a little bit different back then, so there wasn't that many videos out on this stuff, and I didn't have an iPhone yet. I would still find ways to like study and research this stuff. And then when I got into Call of Duty a few years after that, and I was all about getting as many kill streaks as I can get and killing as many people and trying to get my kill death ratio up and playing with my squad. I get it. There's some good things about it. Even talking about it now, I kind of like reminisce and think about like, oh yeah, it was fun. And then I think, no, it was so fucking wasteful. It was such a waste of my life. It was such a waste of time. And I think about how much more distractions the younger generation has now, right? Because I was kind of talking about how I would have to find the information from my video games back then, and it was kind of hard to just scroll my phone and obsess over the thing that I was obsessing over, whatever game it was at that point. But now it's completely different. The game has changed. Now you're addicted to your video games, you're addicted to your phone, you're addicted to your food, you're addicted to the TV. You got all these things going at the same time, and you got all these different things that are wasting your time. And they're taking the most precious asset that you have. If I was 20 right now, I would avoid it at all costs. I would avoid addiction. I would avoid wasting time. And the next thing I would avoid is chasing other people's dreams. This happens because we get influenced by our friends, by our family, by influencers. I wish I would have had more guidance when I was younger. I wish that I would have had a parent or parents that cared about me and would have pointed me in the right direction and tried to insist that I did a certain thing in order to improve my life, but I didn't have that. I know that some people have that, and that might influence you to go and chase someone else's dream. If your parents are dreaming of a certain life for you, just remember they have good intentions, and if they're genuinely trying to tell you to go to school and do these things, they have good intentions. But know when that's not the thing you want to do, and understand that pursuing things that you genuinely don't want to do is going to lead you into a life of unhappiness. There's that saying that you are a product of the 5 people that you hang out with. And if you are hanging out with friends who, let's say, their dreams are to sit around and get high all day, or drink all day, or play video games all day, or go and do illegal stuff, you're going to end up living like those people. Now I'm almost 40 and I realize that God, I was a dumb, gullible kid. And I hung out with some pretty bad people. And luckily, I eventually kind of broke free from that group. I really just wanted to work and make money. I got tired of kind of going to my friend's house and sitting on their couch and just smoking and playing video games all day long. And I finally kind of broke out of that and I started working. And I distracted myself with a lot of work, but I kind of became a bit of a loner. I didn't have dreams to follow, but I got away from following the dreams of my friends who had no goals and ambition. Maybe this bullet point should have been more like, don't chase other people's dreams, but make sure to have some dreams for yourself, because when you're in your 20s, that's the time to dream. That's the time to do the stuff that's crazy, because you have opportunity to fail and still be in a good spot time-wise. If you don't take those opportunities when you're at that age, you get older, and if you start getting into more of a adult life where you have a wife, you have a kid, you have a couple kids, you have a career, you start getting more locked into that path. Not saying that you can't do it later. Now I'm doing that and it's just substantially harder. I realized that the best time to have done them was when I was younger. You put that groundwork in at that age, by the time you're my age, you're gonna be so much better off. In your 20s, if you can avoid making mistakes, one of the mistakes I would avoid is that. So I talked a little bit about your relationship choices and just avoid people that you know are not good for you. It's kind of hard if you don't know. It goes back to kind of being a little gullible and just being wet behind the ears and being 20. If you grew up kind of hard, if you grew up rough, it's easier for you to identify bad people and toxic people, but you might gravitate towards those people more. You might be more inclined because they feel like your people. You got to find the people that you want to be around, the people that you want to inspire to be like, people that are maybe a little ahead of you in life, maybe financially, maybe career-wise, maybe health-wise, fitness-wise. If you have certain goals and you're seeing that the people that you hang around with, they don't align with things that you're trying to do, know that it's okay to start finding new friends, making friends and trying to increase your circle of people. That's something that you can go out and practice. But when you're younger, you feel that having a toxic friend or having a bad relationship in your life is better than not having anyone at all. And if that's just what you're used to, or if those are the people that have just been around forever and you feel like, well, that's just crazy ass Mike, and he gets wasted and starts fights and breaks into cars and does stupid shit. It's cool. I've known him forever. Well, that person is going to end up holding you down. Or if it's like a toxic romantic relationship. I remember my buddy Dean, who watches my videos occasionally. I don't know if he'll watch this one. I remember when I was in my crazy girlfriend toxic relationship, he was older and he was like, you know what? Every guy's got to go through one of these, because then you can spot the good ones afterwards. There's going to be bad relationships, bad people in your life, and maybe there might not be anyone in your life, but remember that it's good to avoid those bad relationships. And if you feel like you don't have anyone in your life, you can always go and find people. When you're in your 20s, that's the time to have friends and have a big social group. And as you get older, that social group's going to get smaller. But I think it's okay to separate yourself from a lot of those people, because most of my big improvements started to happen when I stopped hanging out with a lot of people and I started focusing on myself and making improvements for myself, reflecting inwards rather than trying to find people to relate with and having a bigger social circle. I actually made it smaller to the point where I would just hang out by myself or just a couple of friends that I had. It's actually healthy to be able to spend time alone and know who you are when you're by yourself. If that's what it takes to get away from bad relationships or to avoid them, do that. If you are better able to identify who your toxic friends are or what the toxic relationships are in your life. Even if it's like a family member, try to get away from them. And if you don't know who it is and you need some time to figure it out, it's okay to get away from everyone. Avoid the bad people, avoid the toxic relationships, because if you keep them in your life for too long, it will set you back greatly. Since your 20s are the time when you have the most friends, be aware that you might want to figure out which ones you want to keep around. And the last thing I'm going to say is that I wish I would have avoided spending so stupidly, not saving any money, and getting into dumb, stupid debt that it took me forever to pay off for shit that was pointless. Dumb stuff like Rock Band. That was like $250. Charge it to a credit card. Video game consoles, charge them to a credit card. Clothes and shoes and dumb stuff, charge it to a credit card. Going out and spending money, charge it to a credit card. And then ruining my credit, right? Because I got a credit card when I was really young that my mom co-signed for. That was like early 2000s. My mom signed something and I had a credit card at 17 or 18 years old, ruined my credit, ruined her credit. And then I started fixing my credit. I started getting more credit with bigger limits. And then I started ruining my credit again. If you can't afford it, you shouldn't put it on credit. Don't put money into liabilities. Don't put money into depreciating assets. I financed a motorcycle. It was the dumbest thing ever. I paid double what the thing was worth by the time I paid it off. It was a depreciating asset and I wrecked it and I had to fix it, and it was my only mode of transportation because I was an idiot. I thought that I was going to be cool riding a motorcycle. I rode that thing in the heat in Las Vegas. I rode it when it rained. I rode it one time when it even snowed because I had no option. It was my main mode of transportation. While I felt like a real cool kid because I made a dumb decision to get myself into $20,000 worth of debt when I was 23 years old or 24. I think about that now and I'm just like, man, I would have bought a little beater. I wouldn't have cared what anybody thought of me. I would have been so much better off financially now because I would have been able to hopefully save that money, at least. If not invested, I would have at least not had to spend it. So maybe I would have had a little bit left over. And you hear it when you're younger and everybody tells you, oh, if you start investing when you're 18, compound interest and blah, blah, blah. And by the time you're 50, that money that you put in there will have tripled or quadrupled. And I know that that's not the way to get rich. Those small investments won't get you rich, but it would be really nice to have done that because I could have put $50, $100, $20 here and there and had watched that grown over the last 20 years. And I regret not investing in like a 401k or a Roth IRA or the stock market, or just getting a little bit of financial literacy. If I was in my 20s right now, like just avoid spending stupidly, avoid debt, and try to invest. And with all that said, those are some of the things that I wanted to talk about because those are the things that I look back on and say like, man, I wish I would have avoided doing those things when I was younger. And I want to pass that on to the younger generation now who might be watching these videos and trying to look for a little bit of advice when they're in their 20s. All right, with all that said, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.